So good morning, everybody. Yeah, welcome to this morning's session and our next episode of the Agency Masters webinar series. Today, we will be looking at accurate agency forecasting. So we know that forecasting is something that every agency does or should be doing. But if you're honest, it's often a lot more guesswork than it is science. So we either overestimate what's coming in or we underestimate what's going out, or we don't spot the gaps until it's too late. But accurate forecasting is a really powerful tool that your agency has to protect profitability, to manage resources, and also to fuel growth, especially in today's unpredictable market. So in today's session, we'll be looking at how and why forecasting matters, not just for finance, but also for your entire agency decision-making process, how to properly forecast existing client revenue, including project work and client pipelines, how to plan for new business and the art of balancing optimism with realism, and the essential disciplines, because we know effective forecasting relies as much on process and behavior as it does on the numbers, and crucially, what to do when things change, because they always do. So whether you're running a team that's managing the numbers or you're driving new business, this session is designed hopefully to give you some practical tools and ideas to forecast with more confidence and hopefully less guesswork. Before we dive in, just for those who haven't joined any of our previous Agency Masters webinars who don't know me, I'm Steve. I'm one of the co-founders here at the Agency Works, and as usual, I'm joined by my webinar co-host Kate, who is a principal consultant here at the Agency Works and who's also had previous experience working at a number of agencies before joining Agency Works. So thanks as usual for joining us, Kate.
Thanks for having me, Steve.
Okay, so let's dive in. Let's look at, first of all, why accurate forecasting matters, which may be fairly obvious, but we know that it helps ensure that you have enough revenue coming in to pay bills. It helps you ensure that you have the right resources when needed, and it helps you make more informed decisions and hopefully stay ahead of market trends. But agencies don't always get this right. Often, and Kate, you've definitely seen this, I'd imagine, in your agencies, forecasts we see are typically based on very much kind of finger in the air goals or kind of gut feel. Is that something that you've come across, Kate?
Yeah, absolutely. So I used to hear sort of blanket comments like we need to grow each account by 20% or we need to bring in a further 10% in new business. And I still hear it from some of my clients now. So it's, as you sort of said there rightly, it's sort of finger in the air kind of stuff.
Yeah, it is absolutely just kind of pick an arbitrary figure that you'd like to get. But, we know forecasting shouldn't be guesswork. It absolutely should be based on data, customer insight, or market trends.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do we properly forecast? So there's two parts to this really. So it's predicting how much your clients are going to spend, and predicting how much new business will come in. So before you actually do that, you want to work out how much you need to actually sell. So ideally, what's coming in and what you have available should be the same amount, hopefully. So if you predict your clients are going to spend less than you have available, then you're going to be over-resourced. And obviously, you can try and win new business, but that obviously takes time, and you risk losing money. So you really don't want your people sitting around waiting for new business to come in. So obviously you can sort of busy them up with internal work, but every minute that they're non-billable, you're reducing your profit, which obviously isn't sustainable. And on the flip side, if you predict your existing clients are going to spend more than you have available, then you're going to be under-resourced. So you'll need to bring in additional overheads, such as freelancers, which is obviously a good solution short term, but not so much longer term. So how do we calculate your revenue forecast? So let's start by calculating how much we need to sell. And I've got a simple example of a spreadsheet up on screen at the moment. And this example is based on a 16-man agency. We've calculated the total hours each person has in a year, minus their holidays, and multiplied that by their utilization rate, which is time spent on billable work. And this will give us their available hours. We then multiply this by their charge rate to give us a revenue forecast. Now, to make this more accurate, We can also add in their recovery rate. And this is something that I rarely see, but I'm often recommending. So this is how much of their utilised time is actually normally billed. And generally, agencies won't recover or bill all that utilised time. It's very rare that I would see that. After we've done that, we can roll up the skill set and divide it by 12. And this is going to give you a monthly revenue target that you need to try and meet. Now, if you're a user of Synergist, you can build something very similar to this in our data analytics tool, or you can just use an Excel spreadsheet as we have on screen. And one thing to mention here, if you want to learn more about utilisation, we do have a previous webinar on this that you can find on our YouTube channel or on our website.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think I see a lot of agencies, if you did that, but you stopped at the recoverability part of it, then you'd be forecasting, nearly kind of 2 million in terms of gross income. But actually, if you do look at recoverability, which is really important, it's a couple of hundred grand less than you potentially forecast. So yeah, that's a really interesting point.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to touch now on how we can forecast for our existing sort of client revenue. And I've just got a few pointers for you here. So the first one is use historical data. So that would be your last 1 to 3 years, ideally, to help you identify patterns and trends to then sort of predict the potential future spend. Identify any unused services your clients may not be using, or networking opportunities within the client's organization to help fill gaps and potentially build growth opportunities. And make sure you consider client or market changes. So, for example, economic shifts, structural changes, or maybe even competitor actions. And then speak with your client to validate that forecast. So, clients want you to have great people available when they want them. So, explain that's the purpose of reviewing their plans and your forecast with them. This will add a strategic value for them. And one of our favourite sayings on our webinars is make sure you're being a strategic partner, not just their supplier. So that sort of thing is going to really help. Make sure you're discussing goals, challenges, plans, and timings for the year. And as I mentioned about unused services, to make sure you're sharing your creds deck to remind them how great you are, and make sure that they're using all your services. And then reinforce based on those conversations to make your strategic account plan and make sure that you can achieve that forecast. And then I've got another little plug for a previous webinar that we did back in November. So you can look out for the early Christmas jumpers in that one, which we talk about growing accounts, which you might also find helpful.
Cool. Yeah, when it comes to doing the same but for new business, I think it's about starting with your baseline. As we discussed earlier, your existing client revenue should really align with your available resource capacity. But if your goal was to grow new business by, I don't know, say 25%, how do you start forecasting that growth realistically? First thing I would do is look at your current pipeline. So what new business opportunities are already in play? Also, what's the likelihood of those opportunities converting and when do you expect them to land? So that exercise gives you a clear picture of your active pipeline and helps you build confidence in your short-term forecast. Next is forecasting year one revenue from new clients, as Kate mentioned. So once you win a new client, what does a 12 months of revenue typically look like? We also know that not all clients are equal, so consider breaking that down by things like client size, sector, perhaps budget tiers. What does a large client generate in year one versus a mid-tier or a smaller client? And that helps you build more realistic revenue projections, not just from the initial project, but from the full client relationship. Then we need to layer in growth potential. You need to ask yourself, how many new opportunities do you usually create each month or each quarter? What's your typical sales cycle? How long does it take for those opportunities to convert? And based on past performance, what does year one revenue look like from new wins? Again, it's useful to tier this by client size, by ideal profiles, which hopefully will allow you to avoid overestimating. Finally, as Kate said, we need to back it up with a plan. So if your existing client revenue, it's not enough to produce a forecast, you need a strategic plan to deliver it. So what marketing, sales activity, resource management do you need to hit your target? Also, who in your agency is responsible for driving it forward? So a forecast without a plan is just a wish. The discipline is in the follow through. Again, jumping on the webinar bandwagon, we have done a similar webinar on pipeline, again, which you can find on our YouTube channel if you wanted to have a look at that in more detail.
All the webinars could fill your day with our webinar.
No, absolutely.
Discipline. So as Steve just rightly said, you naturally need to deliver on those numbers now. So it's not just enough to have a plan. You need to take action and have accountability to make sure that it happens. And then you achieve what you set out to do. So giving you a few tips there and a few disciplines that you need to deliver on those numbers. I'm going to take the first one, so the existing client. So this is really around good account management. So making sure that you have strategic account plans to track those plans to ensure you're going to achieve your numbers. Make sure you're having regular check-ins with your clients. And not just around projects, but also ensuring your client is happy and they feel heard. And actively following up on any opportunities you have or any ideas you might have shared with your client. And then also on sort of clients that you've had for a year, so sort of that new business year one type of thing. And the first year is the most precarious with new clients. So a few tips might be to be above expectations. So, but don't work for free. So make sure that your client understands the value that you've added. And if you are working for free, remember your 3 Fs. So that's fun, fame, or fortune. And make sure you're giving the client proactive ideas. So this is seeing that the strategic partner I mentioned earlier and taking your ideas to them, making the work. And then don't forget your post-project reviews. So hopefully to reiterate how amazing your work is and what a great service you've provided, but also to address anything that might not have gone quite to plan.
Cool. From a pipeline management point of view, I think it's important that we help your prospects buy. We don't just sell. We need to guide prospects and clients through their decision-making journey. That's about understanding their challenges, their buying criteria, and also what risks or blockers they face. We need to be proactive in providing clarity, options possibly, the next steps, and so they feel confident progressing. This hopefully shall shorten your sales cycle and increase your win rates. Next thing, BAMFAM. We love this. This is booking a meeting from a meeting. So this is always agreeing on the next step before leaving a meeting. Okay, so leaving a meeting without a clear follow-up is where momentum is lost, your pipeline will stall, and you often end up being ghosted. So get commitment on the next action. So things like, shall we set up a call next week to review the proposal? This keeps the deals moving and gives you better visibility of which opportunities are progressing. And then win-loss analysis. After every major opportunity closes, won or lost, we need to review why. What worked? What didn't work? Was it based on the value proposition? Was it based on pricing, timing, fit? So build this discipline into the process to continuously improve forecasting accuracy and learn where to focus efforts more in the future. For new prospects, it's around targeted marketing to your ideal prospects. So know exactly who you're trying to reach, and again, by sector, by size, challenges fit. Focus marketing, outreach, and business development efforts where you can add real value rather than chasing every lead. This hopefully will reduce wasted effort and improve conversion rates by filling top of the funnel with better fit prospects. Next, we need to ensure that your value proposition is clear, relevant, and also tailored to your audience. So investing time in refining your pitch or your creds decks, case studies. We know that these are often the first impression you make. So a strong proposition helps your prospects see themselves in your examples and hopefully understand the tangible value that you can deliver. And then finally, this kind of always on marketing. So business development isn't just about reactive pitching, consistency is the key. To keep steady rhythm of content, thought leadership, email nurturing, check-ins, especially with prospects who perhaps aren't ready yet to buy. So this builds trust over time. So when the need arises, your agency is top of mind. So delivering the numbers is about consistent discipline, moving live opportunities forward with purpose and continually feeding your pipeline with well-targeted, nurtured prospects. And we know that agencies that commit to these behaviors don't just forecast better, they win more of the right work. Okay, so we've identified some of the disciplines required. How do you go about tracking them? Okay, ultimately, as we've mentioned previously, forecasts are pretty much educated guesses. Tracking actuals against forecasts can give you early warnings that things are off track, or if you need to make things like resource decisions such as recruitment or hiring freelancers. Ideally, you want real-time reporting to track your weighted pipeline for billing capacity, and that could be either by skill set or by individual. Fortunately, you could do that in a magic system like Synergist, like you're looking on the screen at the moment, which, for those who haven't seen the recently released benchmark survey results from the guys at the Wow Company, Synergist has just topped the charts once again as the #1 agency management software used by agencies with a turnover of more than 1 million.
Got to get that plug in
I
there.
say sorry for that
Very
shameless,
good.
shameless,
Very,
shameless,
very
shameless plug.
smart.
Shameless plug. But we also know as well, sitting just aside, we also know that provides accountability because when your teams know that their forecast will be measured against actuals, it naturally improves forecast quality and encourages more ownership of results. Okay, so now we've looked at the disciplines, we'd like to kind of to give you some top tips on how to improve that accuracy. What we've done is we've picked a number out and we're going to split them between existing clients, but then also how it might differ in terms of dealing with a new business.
So I'm going to take existing clients, and Steve's the wondrous new business person, so he's going to do new
Never
bit.
been called that ever before.
So first one there is qualifying early. So for existing clients, so don't automatically assume pipeline from clients is guaranteed. Make sure you qualify every opportunity, even those from your loyal clients. Ask things like, is the budget signed off? Is this a genuine priority? Make sure if you're doing this, you make sure you're over forecasting based on potential work that hasn't been validated.
Yeah, and for a new business point of view, this is really key. We need to be kind of ruthless when we're qualifying your leads. So I know there's lots of different methodologies to this and systems, but whether you're using something like BANT, so whether it's budget, authority, need, timeline, whatever you're using, if your prospect can't give clarity, don't clog up your forecast with false hope. Early qualification helps protect time and avoid inflating forecasts with pretty much dead leads.
And blowing up the bomb. So for existing clients, we're looking at sensing any risks, things like changing of the stakeholders, maybe shifting budgets or delayed timelines. Make sure you're surfacing these early and review upcoming projects regularly for any signs of slippage or change in priority.
Yeah, it's a great terminology, this, but it's about spotting and addressing the hidden risks early on in the cycle. So we need to challenge any vague answers or any over optimism in your sales calls. If something doesn't feel right, we need to tackle it now. Don't let it linger, as it will give you a false pipeline. We need to ask direct questions. Things like, what would stop this going ahead? Or what's the biggest risk to this project? You know they're going to be having that conversation at some point down the line. So if there's something that doesn't feel right, we need to address it. Hence, we need to blow up the bomb.
And dig deeper. So for existing clients, again, don't settle for it's coming, make sure you're getting the details. What's the scope? When will the brief land? Who's involved? Understand if upcoming projects are tied to real business needs or just speculative ideas.
Yeah, I think for me it's about going beyond the initial brief and understanding the true pain points of or the business impact and who else also is influencing the decision. So the deeper your insight, the better your forecasting confidence.
Yeah. And that kind of leads nicely to knowing their decision process, really. So Has the sign-off process changed at all? Are there any new stakeholders involved? Larger projects often stall because of the client's internal hurdles that you perhaps didn't anticipate. So knowing the process can help forecast timelines more accurately.
Yeah, map the decision-making unit pretty early. Do you know who signs off, who influences, who might be the blocker to progress? So your forecasting should reflect where you really are in the decision-making cycle, not just that you've had a good meeting or that you're at a certain stage. And that kind of leads us very much onto the next one.
Beware happy ears. Another great saying, like blow up the bombs, isn't it? I love it. So this is just because your client says, we're really keen, it doesn't mean that it's locked. So validate their enthusiasm with real actions, have they booked the kickoff call? And the big one for all agencies has the PO landed?
Absolutely. I think everybody who has ever been involved with trying to forecast or managing clients or prospects will definitely have had this. I know I have. I probably
Yeah.
still have over the years, but it's about watching out for those false positives. Prospects who love your work but don't have the authority or budget to buy. We need to remove deals that aren't progressing because optimism without proof basically will skew your forecast.
And when do they need it for? When does the ROI need to land? So for existing clients, pinning down the go live or must launch dates, not just when they think it might start, is really important. So understanding when they need to see the return in investment helps you prioritize and then schedule your work as well.
Yeah, again, this is again back to the kind of questioning side of thing. What's driving their timeline? If they have no clear return on investment expectation or there's no real deadline, the likelihood of that closing soon is pretty low, and it should be removed from your forecast.
And weighting. So I'm always talking to my clients about using weighting. So applying a probability and weighting based on project stage or client behavior. So for example, an agreed brief is higher weighting and a vague email mention is lower.
Yeah, it's about, don't treat all deals equally. Use stages or your confidence ratings to apply those sensible weightings and update these weightings as things progress and then that helps prevent an inflated pipeline and gives you more kind of real-time updates.
Yeah, so this is a really important one. So keep your forecast live. Update regularly as your scope changes, any budget shifts or maybe timing slip. So don't rely on last month's data because that's going to kill your accuracy. Make sure you're updating this at least weekly.
And build a habit of updating that status in real time, after every call or meeting. A pipeline that's a week out of date gives you massive false sense of security and kills your accurate forecasting. Accurate forecasting isn't just a one-time exercise, it's about disciplined habits, constant review, and asking better questions. Now, applying these tips across both existing clients and new business ensures that your forecasts are much more kind of grounded in reality, not assumptions, which hopefully allows you to drive better decisions on resource planning and on growing profitability. As usual, we've come to the end of the webinar. We like to leave you with our top 3 takeaways from the content that we've covered in today's session. For me, the first one would be plan realistically. So base your forecasts on real data, historical performance, and current capacity rather than hope or best case scenarios. A realistic plan gives you a much more solid foundation for making smarter decisions and hopefully avoiding those nasty surprises.
And stay on track. So regularly review your pipeline, project process, and resource availability to keep your forecasts aligned with reality. So staying on track means spotting issues early and adapting quickly before they escalate.
And then finally, it's about consistent behaviors, building good forecasting habits across your team from timely updates to asking the right qualifying questions. Consistency creates that reliable data, which, as we know, is the backbone to accurate forecasting.